I have a little friend here. This is Peach. Peach is one of my two pet birds. She's a sun conure. And she might, at any
Wow.
point, she might just fly back to her little cage, which she treats as a palace. So don't be surprised if she suddenly makes a run for it.
Does she do any chirping, or does she talk, or she's not a parrot, right? She doesn't.
No, she's
Okay.
a sun conure. So she doesn't talk at all. But she just makes little cute sounds, and once in a while she makes some loud sounds.
Love it. Nice to have around. So, diving into some of our questions, so obviously you created one of the most loved consumer products, I think, of our lifetime. How does that feel, first of all, like, to know that you made such a big impact on our generation?
Gosh, yeah. What a nice thing to say. Yeah, it feels great to know that I love the idea that every day, every week, every month, people are using Shazam, and it's a lot of people, and increasing over time, hopefully. I think what's exciting about it is that it is solving a little small problem for people, figuring out what that music is. A problem that was something that I had, and it was the inspiration for coming up with the idea. It's easy to use, and I guess the last part is that kind of magical part. It's sort of, obviously it's become accepted as a standard, but as people often tell me the story when they first saw it, they're like, wow, I cannot believe it just did that. And that there's something about that kind of magical part. Maybe when I was a kid, I liked being a little magician, so it's like this is my way of bringing magic to people's lives.
I love that. So you told me once the story of how you named it Shazam. And I just got to tell you, I remember the first time I got an iPhone, I downloaded Shazam. It was one of the first apps on the home screen. And I was just, again, it was like magic. So can you share a little bit more about how you came up with that name?
Yeah. It really is. So the Shazam has been used in different media, and it's a word. It's actually a word you can find in urban dictionaries, and it means to conjure magic. I guess I thought when I first came up with the idea for Shazam, I knew that people it'd be something you'd use on your mobile phones.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of thought, wow, someone's going to just hold their phone up like to the sound in the air, and it's going to identify the song. And again, this is like when phones weren't even yet smartphones; they were just like, this is a long time ago. And I thought that's like magic. It's like literally like you're doing something magical with your phone from the air,
Yeah.
So I just thought it's going to be called Shazam. And I knew there was this old comic series where a little boy, Billy Batson, would say Shazam, and a lightning bolt would come down, and he'd turn into a adult-sized superhero. So I just kind of thought that's the name, and I just came to me, I guess. Yeah.
It was intuition. It just came to you. I love it. So you were with Shazam for quite some time, 1 or 2 decades. I mean, what was it like in the early days? I mean, I know when you first started the company, it was really the early days of the iPhone, like back when the iPhone was, chunky and clunky, is what I like to say. And what was it like? I mean, what were some of the major obstacles you had to overcome to really commercialize the product, getting people to buy into the idea, just organic growth? I mean, back then it was very different than it is now. There was no Facebook advertising or cost per lead downloads. Like, what was it like for you to commercialize the product?
I mean, it was a real challenge. Like we barely survived, frankly. I mean, so we launched. We started the company in 2000, and then worked on it for about almost 3 years to get it to launch. And so then it launched in the summer of 2002. And keep in mind that the App Store and the iPhone came out in 2008. So we then, from our launch until when the App Store and the iPhone came out, was 6 years. The first version of Shazam was something that you dialed a 4-digit phone number on your phone, initiated a voice phone call, and then we would record 15 seconds of sound and then just end the phone call. You can see Peach is excited about that. And then we would send a text message back to your phone with the name of the song, and that was Shazam. But of course, because people were not used to apps, I mean, there were no apps, and people didn't have color screens. We didn't have color screens to work with, and just monochrome screens, enough room for a text message. So basically, we had to educate people about this new behavior, right? Because the only thing people knew what to do with on a mobile phone was make a phone call, send a text message, And then there was one other thing, which was download a ringtone. And so people knew how to, you'd send a little message and say, give me a ringtone. That was it. That's all people knew how to do. So like to then get this message out that you can now identify songs, it was extremely hard. And we hired a head of marketing who had run the biggest radio station group marketing in the UK, where we first launched in the United Kingdom. And then he tried everything with his marketing team. He tried TV advertisements, web banner ads, billboards. We even hired people to walk into bars and tell people about it. But it was really hard because the amount of money we would make per use was so small that like none of this was positive ROI. So we really, really struggled, frankly, and went through many years of near bankruptcy, layoffs, you name it, just trying to survive until like our vision or the world caught up with our vision, shall I say, because with the App Store, suddenly everything came into place.
I think a lot of times that happens. I feel like I meet so many founders on a daily basis. They have such great ideas, but they're early. Like our generation is not ready. And it's funny, like 4 years ago, someone came to me about this technology that's now actually here. And it's just crazy. But yes, I think sometimes the smartest people, like they just have these great ideas, and sometimes you're 10 years early. And I think what you guys did with the tools you had available at that time, you really hacked together an MVP. I mean, talk about using text message and ringtones to make your MVP happen. That's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, we worked with what we had, and in a strange way, it was actually amazing because we were able to create something that every single person with a mobile phone could use. Because every phone could make a phone call and every phone could receive a text message, every mobile phone, and so that was neat that we were able to do that. But yeah, we were working with what was available at the time, and there was a lot of having to build from the ground up. Including the fingerprint database of music, that was not built for us. There were no digitized databases available, and the search engine. There was no Amazon Web Services, so we had to build from the ground up. Beowulf cluster of PCs. That was our search engine. That search across all the music in a fraction of a second for each user. Yeah, it was a lot of working with what we had.
I love it. Specifically from a demand generation perspective, you mentioned you were trying out a bunch of different things at once. I'm curious, was there like a distinct process behind that, or were you just throwing things up against the wall and seeing what worked?
I mean, I think it's traditional. I'm not a professional marketeer. So as I said, we hired this wonderful, amazing guy named Vijay Solanki as our head of marketing once we had our Series A funding in place, $7.5 million of Series A funding. We built a whole team, whole company, and we had Vijay and our very small marketing team. And I think, with many types of marketing, there's a lot of learning that goes on. So you're trying different things. So, I mean, he certainly had some strong instinct about what would be good channels to get to the types of users that we were going after, people that were fanatics of music and listen to music, and the environments they would be in, and then doing tests to see, what would lead to response as much as you can, because keep in mind, a lot of these tests are not click through. But yeah, I mean, there was some innovative thinking. I mean, for example, like when we did radio ads, we would always make sure to be the last radio ad just before you come back to music. And then it would say, hey, try it right now. And then boom, next thing you know, the person's listening to a song on the radio and they can pull out their phone and try Shazam right then. So we tried many different things. Some work better than others. But again, this is the old world days of marketing, old style marketing. And frankly, again, because of services like Shazam, frankly, just don't have the economics to be able to afford that kind of marketing, given the payout that comes with it. So fortunately for Shazam, and this is the most important thing, Shazam basically achieved organic growth, essentially. So, really all of Shazam's growth never came from marketing. It came from people just telling each other about the service, word of mouth.
Okay. That actually is a great segue into the next question. So obviously back then, raising venture money was very different, and there was no LinkedIn, remember, as well. So not as much, transparency in that process. I mean, and also you guys didn't have that growth trajectory in terms of CPA or cost per download. So in your process of raising venture capital, what happened? And what was your criteria for, the right investment partners to really fund your growth?
Yeah. So in our first round, the Series A round, of course, all we had, we were raising money to build an actual commercial product. So we certainly told a story about what we do for marketing, but no one knew whether any of that stuff would work. But a lot of what you're using the funding was to build the actual product, to launch, a commercial grade service that people can just dial into a phone number and a search engine that would identify music across, as much music as possible. Later, I would say the subsequent rounds, we quickly realized that marketing was not working. I mean, in the sense that the amount you spent didn't come close to bringing back that amount of money back. So we told a story that was very focused on partnerships as a way of getting out to users. So partnering with mobile phone companies predominantly, and mobile phone companies would benefit, it was the theory, by having these other services that people could use, and they could use them and do their own marketing campaigns, and then we would ride on the coattails of that. So I would say that became the story. And then when the App Store launched in 2008, we were instantly just one of the most popular apps that users would go and look for, and we'd stay in the top 100 rankings in the app stores. And actually, a venture capital firm that was focused on the App Store, Kleiner Perkins, created a fund called the iFund in partnership with Apple, and it was to fund kind of some of the first app companies, and they came and approached us and became an investor in a later round for us. And when they invested, I think their thesis and the thesis that we then wrote on from then on was just simply that our user acquisition was just going to come organically, and we never really invested a significant amount of money into marketing from that day onwards. We got to a point where we would just continuously get about 8 million new users every month just downloading Shazam. 8 million every month. It was like clockwork, and that's without any marketing. That's
Critical
just
mass. People just love the product. That's exactly, that's what Kleiner Perkins is trying to find now. That's what every single VC is trying to find, is how do you build a product that reaches critical mass and gets 10 million downloads a month?
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
That's incredible. Yeah.
So the way to, the ingredients for that kind of success story, you have to be lucky enough to have come up with something that is very compelling to people. But then you also have to be, focused on building a wonderful product, So I think whenever you invest in the product, you're essentially investing in the marketing, because the product is marketing itself. And so that means that you're just putting a lot of effort into the design, the simplicity, the ease of use, the speed, and just investing, the accuracy, just making the products as just robust and delightful as possible. And so for that reason, one of the things that we stayed very focused on was how our ratings in the App Store, and how did people respond to us. And we would get consistently higher ratings than lots of famous apps like Facebook and Google Maps and so on. We'd stay people just loved Shazam, and that was our focus. We need to just be loved by people, because that's what's going to get people to tell each other about it, which leading to downloads and kind of keeping that user that kind of flow of new users coming.
I love that, because I will say this, in my world today, we deal with we do work with a lot of consumer apps, but most of the time we work with consumer companies, like products. And most of the time you have founders spending money on paid acquisition. They'll literally go and raise a whole round around paid acquisition. It's interesting to hear you have built, you really built something, you let the product lead with marketing. So my next question is related to the, actual design of the product. Shazam is basically like a 1 or 2 page app, right? So was that intentional? How did you guys pare the actual product down? How did you simplify it? What was the thinking behind creating that perfect ease of use?
What did you say? You called it a what? 1 or 2 page? Is that what you said?
Yeah. It's not a complicated mobile application. It's not like, I don't know, Clubhouse, which has multiple, screens.
Yeah.
Shazam is basically 1 or 2 screens, and it's gotten a little, I know with the integration with lyrics and with Spotify, it's changed a lot over the last few years. Yeah. But I remember Shazam originally was basically 1 screen.
Yeah, you had the screen. It's like the big button, the big black button that you push, and then you get to the results of the song. So that simplicity is, I think often what led to the people loving it, and just it was so simple, so easy to understand. And I think that kind of simplicity is actually core behind the success of many great companies. I mean, Dropbox, famously with the folder that just you put stuff in and it's synchronized to the cloud. Google, it's just a search box on the screen and there's like nothing else. And I spent 8 years working at Google, and we were religious about like, don't add anything to the screen, and don't end up like Yahoo with stuff everywhere. So I think the simplicity really sells. It's very satisfying for people. But ironically, it became a challenge for Shazam as well, because we then had a lot of users, but we had to figure out a way to make a lot of money, and monetizing was hard. If you look at the ways that free apps monetize, like Instagram and Facebook and you name it, usually it ends up being advertising, and advertising is a function of how many screens you have, how much time is spent in the app. And Shazam was something that you would just use, identify the song and then move on with your life. And that actually, that was definitely a challenge. And so we invested for years in trying different things that would actually get people to do more stuff in the app, stay in the app, whether it was like sharing with their friends, kind of social type things, or even engaging with what other artists were doing, where there was like almost like Twitter, where artists would show what they're Shazamming, and engaging with TV advertisements, so that you TV shows and TV advertisements, so you could Shazam that as well. And most of these things never took off. So we struggled, and we spent, we raised a lot of venture capital, in total 140 million, and invested a lot of that in all those iterations of trying to do things to get people to do stuff more than just identify a song and move on, so that we could create a big monetization story, and grow our revenues accordingly. And it was a challenge, and ultimately our main compelling use case was getting people to identify songs, people loving the brand, and then moving on to do as stuff with those songs, which is, as you know, the world became streaming, so that meant adding things to playlists. And so it was a perfect fit with the music streaming world, which is why we ended up being acquired by Apple.
I'm curious specifically, as you're scaling the team and building all these products, whether it's engineering or design or marketing, was there like a specific criteria that you would always look for in people you were hiring? This can be both qualitative and quantitative, but what type of people did you want to bring around the table?
For building the products?
It could be designers, engineers, it could be marketing teams.
Yeah, I think in the early days of Shazam, our main problem, was really an engineering problem, because as I said, the user experience was literally just dial a phone number and get a text message back. And so there wasn't a lot of product and design aspects to Shazam, but the engineering challenges were incredible. I mean, to build this highly robust search engine that would work across all this music and so on. So we focused on hiring great engineering talent. And then as Shazam became an app and had more of a kind of a beautiful experience, definitely product and design became more and more important. And we kind of late to the game sort of upgraded our product and design hiring and focus. But this is many years after starting the company. So it was actually like changing the DNA of the company. And then on marketing, as I said, marketing was important in those early days because we didn't know how we were going to get users. So we hired this great marketeer, Vijay Solanki, and he had a small marketing team with our limited budget. But eventually we realized that didn't work. And so while we had like kind of one or two marketing people over the years, even as this company with, huge numbers of users and huge amounts of venture funding, we didn't have really a marketing team, not more than like one or two people, because really we realized that it was just about building great product. And so Shazam was always was an engineering focused company moving on to being a product and engineering focused company in its latter years, and never really ended up building the marketing expertise since we were just growing through word of mouth.
Yeah, I love that. So, this is a perfect place to wrap up because unfortunately we're out of time. I feel like I could talk to you all day about innovation. But do you have any, any thoughts to share around your own philosophy of, building companies and persistence? Like what kind of advice would you give to young founders around persistence, drive, and just a tidbit of your own philosophy around that?
Yeah, I like one of the learnings that I had in building Shazam, but also working at some other amazing places, working at Google for 8 years, from relatively early days when there were 2,000 people, and also at Dropbox when it was less than 100 people when I joined them, is that when I look at how they succeeded, both in the really early stages as well as those kind of early years when you're growing, it's not just what, like, persistence, and persistence is extremely important and it's critical for an entrepreneur, but it's what I like to call this creative persistence, which is basically, really thinking outside the box, not just simply like just continuing forward and trying to break down that brick wall, but actually kind of thinking out of the box, like, what could we do that can, what would be a unique approach to solving this problem? And that's often what breaks through a lot of these startups to the next stage. And it's also something that's unique that often big companies are not so good at because they have just more traditional way of thinking. So thinking really creatively, coming up with completely unique approaches, and when you try to solve those problems that you have to be so persistent about.
Well, that's really great advice. Thank you so much for hopping on with us today. I'm sure that this talk is going to be inspirational to a lot of founders and people that, not only Levitate works with, but people that are watching today. Chris, is there anything you want to share with our audiences? Anything new or a website?
I don't really have anything to share. There's a great website called YouTube. I highly recommend it. I'm just not really out there in the media that much. So there's nothing.
All the more reason why we're so appreciative of this. And I think we're really excited to see what you come up with next. Whatever that is, I'm sure it's going to be extremely innovative and ahead of our time. So thank you so much again, Chris. Really appreciate it. And bye, guys.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks, Chris.